Welcome to my channel, INTJ Island. Today, I'm going to talk about your right to reject a request. A court of law does not attempt to prove a man's innocence, only his guilt. The prosecution has the burden of proof, and the defendant is presumed to be innocent, and that view is maintained and can only be altered if he is proven to be guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. When anyone makes an assertion, he bears the burden of proof. As Christopher Hitchens correctly pointed out in what is commonly called Hitchens' razor, what can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. We spend a lot of time when we are young figuring things out. Does this work or not? At some point in time, we realize that what someone says may not be true, even when it was expressed as if the speaker was quite convinced of his own correctness. We learn to differentiate between valid statements and, to not put too fine a point on it, lies. How do we do this? We compare what we know with the statement to see if the two mesh together well. If they do, we tentatively accept it as being possible and even perhaps probable. Having been burned several times in the past from our natural gullibility, we know it may still turn out to be wrong. We follow up by running it past a trusted authority, perhaps dad or mom, perhaps a teacher. We learn to look it up in a book. As we mature, we start to build the skills that allow us to evaluate things we are told on our own, by looking at the evidence. If the facts we know to be true line up with the assertion, our confidence grows that this assertion is true. When we have enough evidence to remove reasonable doubt, we accept the assertion as being true. Of course, there are many shades of gray in this process. Because there are so many assertions and things bandied about around us, it is sometimes impossible to run them all to ground. Some things can be rejected out of hand because there is no evidence offered at all, and plenty of other things that would suggest that it would be very unlikely to be true. This is not proof that the assertion is false, but only a safe classification of it as being unsubstantiated and probably false. Later on, it might turn out to be true, and we change our evaluation. It is a dynamic process that helps us deal with the overload of information we are all exposed to. This same process of evaluation can be reasonably applied to social interactions, where one party proposes something in the form of a request, and the other party evaluates that request and either accepts it or rejects it. Wherein lies the burden of proof in social transactions? Clearly, it lies with the party who is making the request. Why would I use the term proof at all? Your actions and your life can be impacted to one degree or another by your acceptance or rejection of a request. A proposal of marriage, for example, could potentially change a huge percentage of what makes up your life. When a request is put forward, it is up to the party who makes the request to prove his case. He is putting forth an idea as being a good one, that you grant his wish, and that you go along with his plan or his proposal. It is his assertion that this is a fair request and it should be granted. Therefore, he bears the burden of proof to show that this assertion is indeed valid. But what actually happens? You might hear the request and immediately know that you don't care to accede to it, but rather than the one making the request taking up his legitimate burden of proof, he may well try and transfer that burden to you. Rather than proving his case, he instead pushes you to prove your case of having the right to say no. This is manipulation, and it is cheating. An honest social transaction will not try to shame you into granting a request. Either a yes or a no response is acceptable with no added emotional baggage. If you are encouraged to feel guilty when you say no, it is not an honest social transaction, and the one making the assertion is unfairly shirking his burden of proof and passing it over onto you. When a request is made and your answer is already assumed to be in the affirmative, in complete disregard of your wishes, and then you say no, the weight of responsibility for the hurt feelings that might arise is upon the requester, not the one who declines. This is basic common sense to me, But I have repeatedly run into the situation where I am considered the villain because I refuse to do something that I would not enjoy simply to make someone else happy. Clearly, the other party doesn't care about whether I am happy or not, so why am I the bad guy when I refuse to do something that I will not enjoy? While people don't like to see it that way, there's a certain amount of quid pro quo in relationships. You do this for me, and I'll do that for you. Sometimes you do something you don't like because your friend or loved one has done or will do something for you that he didn't enjoy all that much. Give and take. If that happens in a balanced way, it can smooth the workings of the relationship. It is dealing honestly with one another. If we put it in concrete terms, it would be like, I'll give you $1 today if you give me 4 quarters tomorrow. It feels fair since both parties are acting in a balanced way. But what if your friend says, I gave you $1 yesterday, so you should give me $10 today? Now you have a problem, and the weight of responsibility for this problem lies directly upon the shoulders of your friend. It has ceased to be a quid pro quo and has turned into manipulation. Normally, it isn't as straightforward as that. We don't trade money, but rather we trade favors. And no matter what the history of the relationship, you always have the right to say no to a request. If the other party gets angry, the onus is upon him. By definition, a request requires a choice from the one who is receiving the request. A command requires no choice. But when somebody asks you to do something, that is a request, not a command. And you have the right to accept or reject the evidence he provides to support his assertion that his request is reasonable. If the requester is playing honestly, he will accept either a yes or no answer without drawing emotions into it. The default position is that the full weight of responsibility for any hurt feelings in a request being denied is upon the requester. As a rule, if the request is one that is mutually beneficial, it will be readily accepted. If it is turned down, then it was not beneficial to the one who said no. Therefore, the one doing the requesting should simply accept that, rather than being hurt. He might check to find out what the problem is, so the request could be modified in a way that would make it beneficial to the other party. However, it might be that the other party simply is not interested, and that should be accepted. You are free to make choices. You are not a servant to command. A request, by definition, can be denied. So what is the problem? It stems from the way people learn to manipulate each other starting in childhood. Kids learn that if they cry, they get attention. Later, they learn to punish their friends for not going along with their wishes by ridicule and shunning or by using other tricks. As adults, they simply polish up their act and use more sophisticated ways of doing the same thing. They try to make you feel guilty if you don't say yes to their requests. They in effect want to change their request into a command by cutting off your option of saying no. A thinking personality type is at a loss to understand the feelings type who assume that feelings trump the facts. It is like a logical syllogism to them. Feeling bad is to be avoided. Saying no makes me feel bad. Therefore, you have no right to say no. And they believe it. So when you say no, you are bad. They proved it logically. It is clear that they don't care if you feel bad about going along with their request, but at the same time, they want you to feel bad for saying no. They are playing off your good nature in order to manipulate you. Whenever you find yourself feeling guilty for saying no, or instead finding yourself granting a request that makes you feel bad for saying yes, you are dealing with a dishonest transaction. When you grant the request and you feel good about it, or you say no and still feel good about it, you are dealing with a fair and honest transaction. INTJs tend to make choices based upon reason, and feelers find that to be a problem. Many of them have spent a lifetime of polishing up their skills of manipulating feelings and playing the hurt feelings card in order to get their way. It is much harder, though not impossible, to manipulate the facts. And they also have a lot less practice at doing that, especially to an INTJ. When their manipulation tricks don't work on you, manipulators evaluate things in a way that makes you appear to be cold and unfeeling, a machine. However, if they could take a step back, they would see themselves as being immature children crying to get their way. But of course, they will never do that. Is it any wonder that INTJs have very few friends, and we love our alone time? If you enjoyed the video, please click like. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. I'll see you next time.